Welcome to Workshop 3. If you're watching this remotely, then you will have missed out on receiving a copy of the bee's anatomy with just blank spaces for you to fill in as a bit of a review to see what you can remember from our last workshop. So please, next time you're in class, remind me to give you one of those. All right, let's get started. Today we are going over establishing beehives. This will look at the different legal requirements for you as a beekeeper and also some considerations of how you would like to set up your hive and what you might need to consider as far as neighbours and things are concerned with doing so. Right, choosing and establishing a new site. First up, like I said, there are legal obligations. As a beekeeper in New Zealand, we come under the Biosecurity Act and we are required to register our beehives or our apiaries. And to register as a beekeeper, when you do this, you'll be given a beekeeper number, and then associated with that, you will list your your apiaries. And an apiary just describes any location where you have hives. So for me, I've had hives at my place in Te Awamutu, and currently I've also got hives in Helena Bay. So I have 2 apiaries listed on the Hive Hub website, which I'll show you what that looks like shortly. Part of that registration involves registering your apiaries, as I've just said. And also something you need to be aware of is that each council has different local bylaws concerning bees, and they can be quite different from the urban setting to your rural setting, and quite different from council to council, although there are some key things that most councils take into consideration, and we'll go over those in a future slide. Right, those council bylaws, as I was saying. Okay, one of the main considerations with council bylaws is that you, again, have registered because they know you need to commit to the law, and that's the website which I said we'll have a look at later. It comes under AFB because it's a biosecurity thing, and like I said, we'll go into that in a bit more detail in the next coming slide. But one of the key things councils want to assure is that your bees aren't causing a nuisance to your neighbours. So that will be one of the main things that councils will require you to keep at a minimum. One of the main times where councils get complaints about beehives is in swarming season, which we're in right now. Okay, and that's because suddenly people see the bees. If we're going through a really busy peak season with swarming, and sometimes bees just want to swarm, then having a whole heap of bees suddenly land in your tree can be quite disconcerting for someone who doesn't know about the process of swarming. Now we're going to go over this in a bit more detail after our construction workshops, and we'll be talking about steps that you can take as a beekeeper to help prevent swarming from happening in your hives, thus causing less nuisance in your neighbourhood or to your neighbours. If your bees have caused a nuisance to somebody, the council quite often will have an authorised person, and they can actually ask you legally to remove your hives. They normally give you time to move them, or they will require you to remove them totally by a certain date. Or they will discuss it with you further. It really depends. But it's all about keeping good neighbourly relationships, really. One thing you may not have thought about is the distance of your hives from your neighbours, and also if there is a fence or a hedge on your property, because that can sometimes help. Like if you've got a path or a driveway right beside where you're planning on putting your beehive and you've pointed it, you wouldn't necessarily point your hive directly at that driveway or the pedestrians, because otherwise the bees are going to, after they've done that orientation flight that you learned about last week, flying back and forth in front of the hive and getting their bearings, once the bees have done that, they have a natural flight path inbuilt and they just take off straight away. And they can actually bump into people because it's like there's suddenly a tree there and that wasn't in their original mapping. So it's an accident. They just might bump into somebody. So, but you can avoid that happening by having a barrier in front of your hive if you have neighbours close by, and that's as simple as a high fence or vegetation. If the bees have to come out of the hive and do an upward flight path, then generally 1.8 metres, they're going to miss most people's heads, aren't they? So that is one way that you can help in establishing your beehives so that they're going to cause less of a nuisance to neighbours. Some councils have a minimum property area where beekeeping may be permitted, or they have a certain number of hives that you're allowed to keep dependent on the size of your property. I have downloaded a copy of the Whangarei bylaws, and I will send that with you in an email as well. Right, and we just went over that. They may have limits on the numbers. Great. Okay, I would go over the council bylaws, but this link isn't going to work in the presentation. We'll just try it one more time just to see. No, it's not going to open in this format. So we'll keep on going, and like I said, I will send you a copy of that. Some of their bylaws are quite similar to what I've just read out as a general from having a quick look through it. They do have some limits as per the size of your property, so it does pay to scan through and just check that out. This is the page you will go into next, which says Welcome to Hive Hub, and down in the bottom right hand corner you will see the section which says New Beekeepers. And if you just click on that little button below, it says Register, and when you go in there, it will ask you for things like your name and your address and all the usual things, but it will also ask you for the location of your beehives. And although your beehives might be at home, so you would write down like they're in the backyard near the peach tree or whatever, they also ask for your the GPS location, and that's because obviously a lot of beekeepers don't keep their hives at their home, and they often have them out on farms or very remote locations, and so a GPS locator is the only way that they can find them. Now, Hive Hub is under the Biosecurity Act, as we've said, and it comes under AFB. The AFB organisation tracks AFB throughout New Zealand, and we will go into that in more detail when we do our AFB papers. If you have any further questions as far as Hive Hub or registering is concerned, just flick me a message and I'll be happy to answer them. This time we're going to look at what a good site would have. So this is looking at your apiary site and what you should be looking for and thinking about with your hive placement for a variety of reasons. First up, one of those would be flat ground. It is rather hard to work a beehive if you're on a real slope. Where my hives are currently based at the moment is you do have a slope walking in, but I found a flattish area, and you need an area to work around your hive. You need at least a good metre behind your hive, because that's where you will do most of your work. You don't stand in front of your beehive while you're working it. The next thing to consider is the location as far as the sun is concerned. A nice north-facing sunny location is good. The earlier your beehive gets sun on it, normally in the entrance if you can make it, if it can work that way, the earlier your bees generally will get out working. But again, it's quite warm up in Northland, so you might also like to consider having the afternoon shade. So if you are working your hives in the afternoon, that they're not getting too hot. So sunny morning location works well with a bit of shade in the afternoon. Ease of access is this next one. Obviously, you want to be able to get close enough to it to be able to work it. We've got a short walk to the beehives where mine are currently situated, and ease of access can also consider vehicle access, and good vehicle access for getting up nice and close, and that's really important when it comes to honey harvest. Carrying those big honey boxes a long distance would be hard work. Another factor to consider is your prevailing winds. Sheltered preferably from strong winds. You're going to have to think about securing lids. Most of your hives will come with a strop, or, if you're in a higher wind area. Next thing you might want to consider as well is the forage. What do you have naturally around you that the bees are going to feed on? And thinking about that for different seasonal times too. You don't just want to have plants that are only supply nectar and pollen in the spring and summertime for your harvest. You also want good supply of forage for the bees during wintertime. And we cover a lot of that under Plants for Bees in one of our upcoming workshops. Last but not least, by any means, with a good site, the next thing to consider if you are a commercial beekeeper is that you have an up-to-date contract. So if you are going to work with a landowner, you will want to have a contract in place which just lays out the basic expectations. Sometimes you pay, if it's commercially for a good manuka site, you pay in money. Other sites where I used to keep some of my hives down in Te Kuiti, I paid the landowners in honey, a 10 kg barrel of honey at the end of the season. So if you can't keep your bees at home in your urban situation, you might have a local farm that's quite happy to have you come in and pollinate their stock food or whatever else that they've got around, and sometimes they just like having bees on site, and you could set up a contract with them to do that. Contracts, all right, if we're looking at our contracts, there's several things you have to sort of take into consideration as mentioned on the previous slide. One of those things is that you just want everything to be clear. So who's entitled to what when it comes to several factors? First one, access. So there may be certain times if they're on a dairy farm that the farmer doesn't want you driving through when they're moving all the cows up the race. So when you're allowed access, all of those things are really good to clarify up front. And if there's any gates to pass, normally there'll be some sort of health and safety kind of form you have to sign and fill in as well. Honey harvest. How payment is received after this. So when you harvest your honey, sometimes it's done on a percentage of yield of what harvest you took that season from that site, and it depends whether it's a manuka grade or a bush honey, and all those sorts of things come into consideration there. Landowners' responsibilities. So obviously for the landowners, what are the things you think as a beekeeper that you would want them to notify you about? For one, I would want to know if they were doing any spraying on the land, and most beekeepers are really good, most farmers are really good as far as animal husbandry is concerned. They're looking after their animals and they're looking after their land. So any spraying, but it needs to be mentioned up front, needs to be considered so that there's no spray flow that might go towards your hives, or that they spray in the evenings when the bees aren't foraging or something like that. So as long as you've had those conversations so that everybody's aware before you keep your hives on their site. You as a beekeeper, your responsibilities. No landowner wants rubbish left on site, so you need to do your best to minimize any robbing. That includes cleaning up after any wax or honey might have been scraped off any frames, and taking away any of your rubbish, which might be your varroa strips or anything that you've used while you've been on site. Closing gates obviously as you go through them, all of those things that are just basic in a farm situation, but it pays to put them out there as blah. I'm going to have to redo this one. Health and safety. Yeah, all plans are adhered to at all times. Now we're just going to have a bit of a look at apiary setup, and some of the things to consider are there's sort of about 5 questions to ask yourself about when you're setting up your apiary, and to make you think through what will work best for you. And these are, can I get my vehicle to all hives? It might not seem important at sometimes, but if you've got lots of hives, it can be important for your honey harvest. Ease of access, sort of related to the vehicle, but sometimes you can walk in a short distance. So yeah, what's the site like? Is it the most efficient setup for me as far as how far apart are all my beehives from each other and how you've got them set up within the apiary? Am I utilising all my resources well? And does the setup also work for the bees? And we'll cover that in the next one of the next slides when we look at how you might arrange your hives on a site. This is what I was talking about as far as arrangements on a site. So each of these squares in the apiary layouts are considered more towards the bees, that last question that I asked. And some of them take into consideration vehicles as well. So we'll just look at each of them. So the yellow one at the top there, that is a beehives that are just placed and you can see the little arrows coming out. So all the bees are flying out in a different direction. As a beekeeper, you'd probably stand in the middle to work on them because you generally work always at the back of your hives or sometimes to the side, depending on how you've got them set up. All right, and so then the bees fly out and it minimizes drift. So drifting is bees returning to the wrong hive. Generally, sometimes if you have all of your beehives set up in a row, what can happen is there is a prevailing wind. You'll find that the beehive at the end of the row, away from the prevailing wind, will be the strongest because some of those foragers have drifted back down to the end, and they kind of get accepted in the door half the time by the guard bees who are at the entrance because they've got kai and they say, hey, come on in, bring in your kai. So you'll find that that can happen. And so this is a way of minimizing drift, which also helps to minimize disease being spread from one hive to another. And here's another setup where all of the hives, all of the entrances are facing in. So sometimes I've seen this used in an orchard situation where they have the beehives all facing in. I haven't seen it used that often though, but again, the bees still know to return down, so you'd find out and up. It makes the bees fly more in that upward pattern. Then here you're in the purple hives. These ones look like they would have been on pallets, so you'll see this more commercially, and 4 hives on a pallet, and each hive is facing a different direction. And also they're in a sort of a U shape almost. So this one also works as far as for a beekeeper with ease of access. If you were a commercial beekeeper and you're feeding, you can back your truck right in here, and you normally have a tank on the back of your ute, and you can probably reach all of the beehives without having to get out of your vehicle again and move it to position so that the tank, it sort of works like a petrol hose, so that you can reach each feeder nice and easily. And again, the same with this one, but these are single hives. Again, ease of access for the beekeeper, although with the beekeeper here, if you're pulling into this front, you're right in the line of sight. So I think this one would be better. You've only got a couple of hives that are coming out towards you. So yeah, those are some apiary layouts, and as part of your assessment, you were also asked to draw what you would consider a good apiary layout. And an apiary layout normally would involve more than one hive. So maybe you want to keep some of these in mind. Right, I've got a little video here. I don't know if it'll play in class. We'll just push and see. Is it going to play in this footnote? It is. So I might just disappear off while it plays. I like to show you Stuart's things. I know they're bare basics, but it's just good for you to be aware of what's out there, and he does go over the basics really well. The other Kiwi one that goes over the basics really well is, oh gosh, I've forgotten his name. Trev's Bees. He's now retired, but if you search Trev's Bees on YouTube, he's got a lot of going over some of the basics, which is really good when you're starting out for researching. But hopefully we'll cover most of those things in classes for you as well, so you'll have a good foundation. All right, I think we're on to our next slide. Yeah, they've just got another slide here of Stuart moving beehives and moving them safely. We will work through this one as well because it just gives you the overview of how to move a beehive and lets you know some things that you may or may not have considered. So you'll notice Stuart's just taping up the entrance. You can put foam in the entrance, or you might have those plastic hive bases that we looked at last week where you can close them. All right, he covered off the drifting and the arrangement of hives again, so it gives you another idea of how others might arrange beehives within an apiary. There are just a couple of pests to be aware of in the apiary, and as you can see from the pics, they're mainly mice and wasps. Mice and rats. Rats can make a real mess of a hive. I actually have never had one in one of my hives, but I do use those plastic bases that have the little door controllers, so it minimises it down quite a bit. Mice and rats can squeeze into the most remarkable of places, and sometimes with the wooden base you can get mice that try and make their home within a hive. Normally it's not a problem in a strong hive. It's sometimes in an overwintering hive when their numbers are small, but even still there have been beekeepers who have opened their hives up at the end of the season and the bees have actually stung the little mouse, but because they're not strong enough obviously to pull it out and fly it away, the little undertaking bees or the cleaning bees, that they actually sting it and then they propolis it, and it actually becomes mummified because the propolis has antibacterial properties, and so it just mummifies it and it stops any of the germs from its decaying getting into the beehive. So they're pretty good at taking care of that. Wasps can be an issue. At this season, it's spring, so if you see a great big queen German wasp around at the moment, normally kill it because the queens come out of hibernation to start their hives up again. And again, it's normally an autumn thing. When your hive is nice and healthy and strong, it can take care of it itself. There are a couple of baits on the market. One of those is called Vispex and one of those is called Hawkeye. Those are both New Zealand branded ones. EPA stands for Environmental Protection Authority, and they are in charge of any new organisms or things that are introduced to the system. So as they're one of the organisations that have reach over beekeeping. They're responsible for the approval of hazardous substances for use in New Zealand. So that's any of our Varroa treatments, treatments for wasps and other things like that that you might use. EPA set out the rules to protect the environment and the people in non-workplaces from those hazardous substances. And they're also responsible for any of the rule labellings or the safety data sheets. If you're ever wondering what a chemical contains, any safety data sheet is available for any chemical online, even your basic bleach and things like that. You can just search the safety data sheet online and have all that information at your fingertips. And then WorkSafe is the other body, regulatory body that oversees some of the beekeeping areas. They provide guidance and information and tools to help organisations understand their obligations as far as WorkSafe is concerned and providing a safe work environment. One of those for which in beekeeping has now become about the lift. So how we discussed that on one of our first days about the honey supers. They've reduced it down to being 35 kgs, becomes a 2-person lift, I think it is. So that's why most beekeepers are going down to a 3/4 box for their honey supers. They enforce the rules for work-related manufacture, use and handling and storage of your hazardous substances. So any chemicals that you might use for, again, mainly treating the varroa. And the two of them work together to a certain degree in the implementation of the Health and Safety of New Organisms Act. And there's a little bit more. I think you've got some details on pages 6 to 8 of your student book, and we'll go into a little bit more about that Act on the next slide. So as I said, both of those bodies use the HSNO Act as the foundation for their legislative requirements. Now, the Hazardous Substance is what that stands for, and New Organisms Act of 1996. And the purpose of that act is to protect the environment and the health and safety of people and communities by preventing and managing the adverse effects of hazardous substances and new organisms. So why is that act relevant to beekeepers? Sort of spoke about that already when I talked about the two governing bodies. And that is mainly because we use hazardous substances and materials to treat diseases within our hives, and that main one being varroa. And the Act gives us guidance, the apiculture industry guidance on how to use those and what guidelines to follow, even with our organic substances that we use to treat for varroa as well. Preventing any adverse effects, hopefully, to us as beekeepers and to the environment, and to, of course, to our bees. The key principles of that Act are laid out as the safeguarding of life and the supporting capacity of air, water, soil in the ecosystem, and the maintenance and enhancement of the capacity of people and communities, just basically to provide for their own economic use, social and cultural well-being, and for, their reasonable foreseeable needs of future generations. Right, this is going to bring us to the health and safety plan for Helena Bay. Now we have some paperwork to read out and to fill in here. So obviously we normally have some sort of health and safety guidelines for Helena, so I'm just going to read this out to you, and you'll all be required to sort of sign a form at the back saying that you've read this, and it also has a space to put in an emergency contact. Haven't had to use it yet, but just in case something happens and we need to contact an emergency contact on your behalf. So this just says that parking is limited at the Helena Bay apiary, and just past the yards, and so parking is limited in the driveway, just past the yards and left to the quarry. So when possible, travel in groups, and just a wee reminder there, don't travel with your hive tool in your pocket, because if you're traveling in someone else's car, they might not appreciate that poking into their upholstery. When we're at the apiary, there's no toilets available for use on site, so please make use of the toilet at the hall here before we head out. And our emergency gathering area, I'll show you a map on the next slide, is just outside of the apiary paddock. So we're out of the line of the bees basically. Work must not commence on the hives until 5-minute briefing is completed by the head beekeeper, being me in this circumstance, and that is, again, we'll do that just outside the hives in that emergency gathering area. Before making your way to the apiary site on foot up the dirt road, take any gear that may be needed from the back of the head beekeeper's vehicle. And the health and safety things I have to make you aware of are obviously that you could slip, trip or fall. You know, you've got to point out all the basics. So be aware of your surroundings and wear that appropriate footwear. And when we're beekeeping, we discussed it's either ankle boots or a gum boot or of some description. There are stock animals and other people who may be on site. We are having some building work done, and no, he probably shouldn't be here on a Sunday, but he may be. So there's sheep or goats that'll be in the paddocks that we're using, so please close the gates obviously after walking through them. And as far as people are concerned, just take care not to leave any honey or syrup or around the place. I do have buckets on site at the apiary to put any hive scrapings that you take from when you're opening the hive, and they go into a bucket, and then there's a separate bucket for rubbish there too. And that just, and don't leave any honey frames out or exposed, because it can promote robbing behavior in our bees, and our bees go a bit hyper during that, and so we're and that heightens the chances of stings to animals and people nearby. There are dogs on site as well, but I don't know whether you'll actually end up meeting them, so but just to make you aware, there are small dogs on site too. Bee stings is an obvious one in an apiary of a health and safety thing that you might face, so wearing the appropriate PPE to minimise stings. Have one of the other students check your bee suit for openings, double checking that you've done up that zip properly on your hood and you've sealed down the little bit of Velcro at the front. If a sting occurs, there's scrape it out with your hive tool. Put a bit of cream on it as a minimum. We will have antihistamine tablets are in the bee health and safety kit, and we also have the EpiPen available on site too, which we'll stop here and have a little look. Well, I have got the demo one here today for you to have a little look at and to play with. All right, other hazards that you might face. Manual handling, okay, so just a reminder to use those appropriate lifting techniques. You know what it is, bend at the knees, don't use your back as a crane, and if need be, work in pairs. Generally, I always set you up to work in pairs on the hives anyway. So help each other, lift the boxes together, don't struggle alone. Chemical handling, when we are handling Varroa, we will have appropriate gloves to wear. When you're doing that, you might want to change out of your bee ones and put chemical ones on. And you probably won't be doing this, but you will see me use it. If you are using a vaporizer for oxalic acid or the third grade mineral oil fogging, then we actually wear a chemical mask as well. Obviously with our smokers, they're a higher risk, and it's supposed to be a dry summer. Well, it's yet to see. So ensure that you take care with lighting it. And when in use, put it somewhere secure. When not in use, put it somewhere secure. A lot of the commercial guys, I've never been able to get a handle on myself. They keep it just between their knees when they're not using it, then just grab it and puff it again. So you might want to give it a go, figure out what works for you, but just take care of where you place it when it's not in use. And obviously extinguishing it carefully after you've used it and returning it to its appropriate box. Extinguished either with grass, you can put in the spout to extinguish it, or there are little plugs that I've got to go into it, which I'll show you, and return to the box in its appropriate way afterwards. Your hive tools, again, take care with your hand placement, especially with you guys with your new hive tools. they can be very sharp initially. So when you're scraping the hive, don't sort of place your hand in the back and scrape towards it. Just think about where your other hand is placed. If you're wearing your bee gloves, it's going to minimize any cuts anyway. And the other thing with your hive tool is to clean it. So before working in my apiary, you will be required to clean it, and you can either clean it by smoking it in the smoker to burn off any wax or propolis, or you can have cleaned it beforehand. I actually sometimes use oven cleaner on mine. It seems to melt the wax off nice and easy. But definitely cleaned between apiaries. If we find any disease, we will need to be cleaning our hive tool between opening hives. All right, hive scrapings, we've already covered that one. That's all kept into a bucket. Keep the lid closed to minimize any robbing happening from that bucket. And then the other thing is just be aware of heat stroke and dehydration. Take your water bottle. You really need your water bottle. Stay hydrated. If you need to have a break, there's a little gate to the side. You can just duck down there, sit under the trees, or just move into the shaded area for a wee while. Take your hood off, you know, have a drink, and then get back to it. Communication, our cell phones work on site, so that won't be a problem. And the emergency contacts list that you're going to fill out, once that's laminated, it will be kept in our beekeeping trays should we need it. Any bee gear, if there's extra gear that is needed, it will be ready beside the big black shed. Otherwise, we won't be heading over to the house really. I'll try and bring most of what we need in the truck with us for that day. But if you do have to go over to the shed, it is a bit of a slopey up and down track, so be careful on the track and don't carry more than you can cope with. And obviously any accidents have to be reported to me, and appropriate health and safety forms filled in, which I need to complete and return to land-based training. So you won't have signed this, but we'll have to get you to fill it out, and it'll be just laminated a bit later to go onto our tray. So another thing to remind me about when I next see you. All right, wonderful. Okay, just up here you can actually see the site. So, oh, my head is covering a little bit of down here is actually Russell Road, where my little head is covering, unfortunately. So the parking areas are actually these green rectangles. So you'll pass the yards just at the gate here. It looks a lot bigger. It's not that big. So there's parking here on this little dirt road that goes to the quarry. So we could probably fit 3 or 4 cars there. We can fit a couple of cars here. This is beside the dirt track to the right. That is actually the way we walk up to the apiary. And maybe a couple of cars to the side. There is a drain in on this side, so just be aware when parking there that you're missing that drainage area. On the first day we might just drive out in a convoy anyway, so you can all see it. And where this red arrow, red star is the emergency meeting spot, sorry, that's the first one, so that's just outside the apiary area. The red arrow indicates the way we access the main walking way, and we walk up this way to the apiary. It's only a short walk. It looks really long on here, but it's only like 2 minutes, 5 at the most, probably 2. And the blue rectangle here represents where the hives are. Okay. Next to that, you've got a yellow star over here beside the big black shed. That's where I meant for picking up occasional gear, and we would walk down this little track up here to get to that if we need it. I'm hoping that I'll have most of it in the truck with us, and we'll park it down here and walk it up. When I eventually get a quad, we'll be driving that up there, which will make it a whole lot easier. Alrighty, so that covers off that side of things. This is just a little video again to show you, which is just a copy of one that my students did back in 2018. It's sort of a bit of a take on the health and safety, but it just gives you a little bit of a reminder of what to keep in mind. It was their sort of fun take on things to remember in the apiary.
it'll disappear again while you watch it.
Running, G. You're running like an Espelin. Scene 5, take 2. I said that yesterday in every video, so... Yeah, no, we all started saying it. Bravo! Putting your hand out, sweet. Start smoking up. Start getting executed.
Hold it. Okay, Olivia, you're in it. Action.
Stay there, stay there, stay there.
Yeah.
You mean to jump over?
No, she was good. She just needs to hold it for longer. Yeah. Okay, go again. One more time. Are you busy filming?
Talking, G, so you get the good stuff. Holy shit! Holy...
Poor Aiden.
Scene 1, take 3. Action. Sure.
Oh, short stuff.
It's too hard, I can't reach it.
She said leave.
Just push record. You can. Stop waving in the camera.
A bit too far away from the hive, you think?
No.
Oh, that's getting edited in, isn't it?
All right. Take 3. Bees and Van. Action. Who did it? Take 3. 1, 2, 3, go!
Sup, G?
Okay, as you can see, they had lots of fun making that, and don't worry, you don't have to make a movie at the level 3. That was just something that the level 2s had to do. But yeah, it was kind of good, and it's kind of worked because I can use it for my health and safety intros or whatever. Yeah. Okay, let's see if we can flick on to our next one. And just one more screen after that. All right. Okay, now this is just a little intro, okay? It's an intro to disease management, because there is an assignment that you need to be aware of, to keep in the background, keep into your mind, and to maybe work on month by month as we go through the course. So that's why I'm introducing this now. There is no assessment for this part at this stage. We do the assessment for this paper right towards the end of the course, when you've had enough background information and been in the hives enough that you know what we're talking about. All right, so what is the disease management plan? Obviously, it's a plan or a seasonal calendar that gives you an idea of what you do in the hives each month, and helps you to be proactive, so you know what to do and when to do it. So it's sometimes called an integrated pest management plan, and it covers how to deal with diseases and pests and other things within the beekeeping calendar. We're probably going more to calling it a seasonal operational plan. Considering that some pests and diseases are seasonal, here at LBT, we like to combine our IPM, our Integrated Pest Management Plan, with our seasonal plan. And an example you can find in your resource book under the disease management area, and that one is set out by seasons: autumn, summer, winter, spring. I think for your assessment they've asked you to do it monthly, but we go over that in our final slide here. So why have a disease management plan? Kind of discussed a little bit already, but it helps you to see the overall picture, which in turn makes it so you run a proactive operation. You make sure that you have all the gear that you need at the right times, and helps you with key functions like feeding, monitoring, treating and buying gear, etc. Which helps to cut down on your stress if you know what you've got coming up, and enabling you to make good decisions, obviously. Right, obviously, as we talked about, and how to prevent pests and disease from getting established and ensuring strong, healthy hives. And helps, if you are in commercial, for your employers to get a buy-in from your employees if they can see why and when you're doing something throughout the season, and why you do it at a certain time. So for the, and there's also a living document. So it's something that changes. So even though you're going to start writing this now, as you beekeep for a wee while, you will review what you do and choose to do things differently. One of the things that I've been experimenting with for the last 1.5 to 2 years is using just organic treatments for my varroa. So that has obviously changed what I would have had in my plan originally. So when do you use it? Obviously all year, okay? It's throughout the whole season, and especially with major tasks like the things that are big things in your calendar: your feeding, treating varroa, and doing your disease checks and your buying gear. Using a plan helps you to ensure best practices, and hopefully enables you to have nice, big, strong, healthy hives, and will make it more economical and sustainable operation for you. So writing a disease management plan, like I said, this is an intro, so this is just to show you now what the expectation is. The assignment requires you to write an annual seasonal plan on your own personal hives. So this is for you to use at your hives at home, so that you've got something to refer to. Preventing pests, so they want you to identify within your plan the months when you would be checking and treating for pests and diseases, and you must include a minimum, it's a minimum of 3 major pests. So that might be wasps, it might be varroa, it might be mice and rats, and what you're going to do and when. And preventing diseases, and you must include 3 major diseases. You can kind of count doing your varroa under here, although it is actually a pest because it's something extra in the hive, but that varroa carry a lot of diseases and transfer diseases to our bees and make them susceptible to more diseases. So you include 3 major diseases in your plan, and you have to have a feeding plan in there. Even if you're planning not to feed sugar syrup to your bees, include that. And although if you have a really bad honey season, they also want you to write something about your feeding and what you would do if you had to, okay? Seasonal recommendations. So for each month, they want a summary, justifying your recommendation based on your area. So like for Northland, and I'm not 100% sure what differences there'll be for Northland compared to the Waikato. It's going to be interesting as I go through this season for me. The tools you require for the task and checking any maintenance of the apiary and gear. So that's like a winter thing that you'd be doing most of those checking and maintenance on your site and on your gear. Now there are lots of seasonal plans available online. You are welcome to refer to them, and there's even one in your New Zealand Practical Beekeeping book that breaks it down month by month. But you'll find that a lot of the things are repeated for 3 months in a row, and that's because New Zealand's variation, and with our temperatures and things, different things happen in the bee season in Northland compared to Southland. So they want you to sort of try and show a little bit of that. So I know it's all new, and for me it's new being up here too, so a little bit of juggling, and like I said, it's a living document, but as long as you cover those things, that's what you'll be marked on. So it's something to be aware of, and some people choose to do it month by month as they've gone through, and just they keep a little notebook, and then it's really easy at the end of the course to quickly whip it up. All right. So that is us for today. Thank you, team. And hopefully if the weather has held, we're heading off to the apiary now for a bit of an orientation.